What's up, Swole Soldiers? This is episode 23 of the Strength House podcast, and this episode is a complete listener Q&A episode where we're going to answer all of your questions that you submitted to us. We're going to talk about how to establish yourself in the fitness industry as a coach, how to manage deload weeks, how often to do it, and what the hell is going on with infographics on Instagram. We've got two awesome blonde ales coming at you tonight. Stay tuned.
The Strength House Podcast, featuring Greg Robbins and Tony Bonvecchio.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 23 of the Strength House Podcast. We are live coming to you on a Wednesday evening. I got Tony B next to me as usual, and tonight we are going fully listener question and answer. So we've already got 8 great questions to answer on the show from followers on social media. But if you have a question while listening, feel free to just comment if you're on Instagram or Facebook, and if we have time, we will get to your comment or your questions as well. How you doing today, Tony?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Not bad. It is always a good day when Wednesday has become our treehouse trip day.
Yes, sir.
And so today we headed up to the motherland, and not our favorite of their offerings, but...
Yeah, we always joke, like, what if it's a Brighton Eureka day, and it was a Brighton Eureka day, and shows you how spoiled we are, that 2 beers are actually really good. Yeah. And we're disappointed in them just because there's so many good beers up there. But beer number 1 of the night may look like a repeat, as we've got Eureka, and we got a blonde ale episode all around. We've got 2 awesome blonde ales, which is definitely unique because this would make, I think, only the 3rd episode where we haven't done IPAs.
Yeah, it is a rarity.
But we did Eureka during our infamous outside episode.
Yes.
But we did Eureka with Citra. This week is Eureka with Galaxy. Perhaps my favorite hop of all.
Yes, I think we're both in agreement that we like that one quite a bit.
Yep.
So, let's crack into it, right?
Yeah. Beer number 1, Eureka from Treehouse Brewing Company in now Charlton, Massachusetts.
Charlton, Mass. We got a shout out from our man Cam. Cam, good to hear from you, bud. Hope everything is well.
All right, so as we pour beer number 1, we're going to resurrect the beer fact.
It's back, and it's coming at you hard.
Because Greg picked up this bad Larry today. If you guys can see this. This is the Oxford Companion to Beer.
Yep.
It's a 900-page book all about beer, edited by Garrett Oliver, who is the brewmaster for Brooklyn Brewery in Brooklyn, New York. And I have a page picked out, very relevant to our beer style today. I'm going to tell you all about blonde ales. So blonde ale, also referred to as golden ale, is a bit of a catch-all term, though it usually refers to a beer in the same general family as cream ale and Kolsch. Kolsch? Did I get that right?
Kolsch.
Yeah, Kolsch. I mean, I figure we'd get our mispronunciation out of the way early in today's episode.
Maybe it won't happen to me.
These blonde ales also feature a low to moderate original gravity that is fermented out very low for a crisp and dry finish with a detectable malty sweetness that is like bread or toast rather than caramel. So original gravity referring to like the early stages of ABV. So these all come in at really low, like 4.5 to 5.5. This one is 4.2, making it like this is ideal barbecue, mow the lawn, hot weather beer, beach beer. And blonde ales are supposed to be easy drinking and very approachable. And though this sounds simple, it isn't. Brewing them requires skill because any flaws will be noticeable. So any beer like this that I think is lighter on flavors and light on the ABV, not like aggressively dry hop, not usually any funky stuff added in, you got to be pretty sharp because the flavor has to kind of stand out for itself. So
that makes sense.
Yep.
You could see why the head brewer of Treehouse often says that he's really proud of this beer. Which, by the way, when you taste it, this is actually way better than even the last batch we got. To me, like, this is a lot hazier.
Yep. If you look at it,
a lot more flavor.
Right, a lot of like low ABV ales that you look at are pretty translucent. You can see right through them. But yeah, hazy through and through, and just excellent.
Yeah, I'm kind of kicking myself actually that I didn't get more of them.
Galaxy's the best, man.
Yeah, it tastes like a lighter version of green, like just a little bit, lighter and easier to drink, I'd say.
You know, it's really interesting that of all the Eureka variations, this one tastes the most like our second beer that we're going to drink tonight.
Yeah.
Even though the hop variant is different.
Yeah, even from the look of it. I remember Eureka being a lot clearer before.
Not this guy. Haze all the way through.
No, this is excellent. It's a lot of flavor for 4.2%.
Yeah. And I think it's worth noting that we're on episode 23, right?
Yeah.
So, and we've never repeated a beer. We came close tonight, in name only. So that makes 46 different beers that we'll have had.
46 different beers.
Pretty impressive, right?
Hashtag blessed.
So, so if you want to go back through and see all the beers that we drank, you go ahead, head on to thestrengthhouse.com and click the podcast page. You'll get kind of like an inventory of all the episodes we've done, and we list the beers on there if you're anxious to go back and try any of the stuff we've had on the show. Yeah. And
I just noticed on looking at the Facebook Live how bad I got sunburned today waiting in line at Treehouse.
You got some pink going on.
I'm a little raw. All right, so let's get into some of the questions that we got, and I'll kick us off and pose one to you, Tony.
Sure.
Question 1 comes from Thomas, and Thomas asked, if you could go back to the start of your fitness career, would you change anything? What was your biggest mistake, maybe?
Great question. Hindsight is always 20/20, and it's hard for me to go back. And obviously, I made a ton of mistakes. I definitely got into this industry kind of backwards. I went all experience, as in just lifting, and no academia. And then when I realized I couldn't get a job that way, I went all academia and no experience, coaching-wise, and never really got any coaching experience up until very close to the end of my grad school career. So I wanted to be a collegiate strength and conditioning coach. So I went to grad school, tried to get a master's degree, CSCS, the things that I thought I needed to be a collegiate strength coach. And turns out even after graduating with a master's degree, I couldn't even get a job interview because I had zero experience. I chose a program that was more focused on research and laboratory stuff and very little on coaching and strength and conditioning. So going back, I would have put more emphasis on maybe an internship or chosen a program that would have gotten me more experience up front. But it's hard to say that I regret anything because it's led me to where we are now, which is drinking beer with my business partner.
Yeah. And I would echo that whenever you get posed a question like that, you can answer it for sure, but if you're happy with where you're at presently, then sometimes the road that leads you there is exactly how it needs to be to get you where you're at. So it might be cliche, but I guess I would prefer to say I wouldn't change anything about my path. Because if you get met with difficulties and challenges along the way and you overcome them, then that's just going to make you a stronger person and a better coach. So having a bunch of handouts to get where you are doesn't necessarily, it might seem like an awesome situation while it's unraveling, but in the end, you might not learn as much from that journey. But I'll answer the question too, just to because there are things I guess you could have done differently. My entrance into the fitness world, I guess the other reason it's hard to answer the question is because I don't know if I could have done it differently. I didn't have the academia or the experience, so that doesn't leave you a lot of options necessarily. We've talked about hiring people, just posing the question for the future when that time comes. And it's like, I think you definitely do look more towards the person than their experience or their knowledge. But I was 20 years old, so even as a person, I had a lot of growing up and learning to do. I don't know if I would necessarily want to completely hang out with 20-year-old Greg myself now. Anyways, so the only option was to do like commercial personal training because the barrier to entry is so low, which is probably something that needs to change, but it worked out for me and it's worked out for others as well, that there's an opportunity to get good at this craft without having, some of the boxes checked that you need for other professions. It also lends itself to a lot of, poorly trained coaches out there as well. So it's a double-edged sword, and there's probably more going towards the poorly end than there are the well-versed end.
Yeah, but I think it's really, there's a lot of valuable experience to be gained from training in a commercial gym and doing one-on-one personal training, because usually you're able to choose your own workouts, do your own methods, so you're kind of your own boss, so you have some freedom to experiment. You got to learn how to sell, which is hugely important. No matter what branch of strength and conditioning you work in, you're always selling. And you get to work with a huge multitude of people. Like you're not like pegged into one specific type of population. You can train anyone. But I think there's some really valuable wisdom in the fact that you were very largely experience-based, and that having limited academic experience hasn't really held you back at all, really, has it?
No. I think early on there's like, not having the academic side, not having a degree in at all lends itself to, like, it closes some doors for you. So it in some ways it kind of focused me, because it's like, well, I'm probably not going to be able to go to the college or organized sector because they're going to require a degree. If they didn't, then it would be like scoffing at the business that they're in completely, which is selling degrees to people. So like,
yep,
it's they have to require that, or else it would be like, it would it would knock out the pegs that everything was standing on, so to speak. I don't think that's a saying, but I just came up with it.
We'll take it.
We'll take it. And like you said, it's kind of, and we're getting a little off track on this question, but it's a good thing to talk about. I'm sure this will help you out, Thomas, anyways, is the evolution of a fitness professional often does start with one-on-one personal training, which is interesting because if you're a one-on-one personal trainer in most places, you are required to do every piece of the puzzle, from selling the person to scheduling the person to writing their program to coaching them to checking in on them. So it's like giving somebody with very little to no experience a lot more to do than they can probably handle. But it can definitely kind of be the dip, if you will, the hard work that you kind of just have to figure out and get through if you want to get to that next level. So
yep. Juxtapose that to like some really high level internships in prestigious Division I collegiate programs where you got to have all these prereqs to get in, very competitive, and all you're allowed to do is like clean equipment.
Right.
You hear of a lot of internships that are like that where you actually don't get to do any coaching. So if you want maximum coaching experience and basically like all the leashes taken off, go do personal training.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where the barrier is lowest for entry. It's really kind of a paradox in that sense, but that's a pretty quick way to get a lot of experience really fast.
Yep, it absolutely is, and I think doing a good job with that opened up doors for me going forward. So
you'll just have to keep up with your own continuing ed, and you're probably not necessarily going to have anybody who's going to mentor you or tell you like, this is how you do, this is how you coach this exercise, this is how you write this kind of program. That's going to kind of be on you.
Yeah. Which is kind of leads into the biggest mistake. I think the biggest mistake early on in my career was not embracing the fact that you could learn something from just about anybody. So I was in personal training in a commercial gym for a little over 3 years, and I ultimately left because I felt like there wasn't a lot of people left on staff that were pushing me to get better, and I wanted to hone my craft and be a really good coach, and that's always been something that's been super important to both of us. So it was never about monetary things for me. It was always about just wanting to get better at the skill. And so there were other guys and girls that worked in that gym that maybe I didn't feel from a skill set that they had anything left to offer me, but they did keep full client rosters and have a lot of great advice, probably if I opened myself up to it, on how to interact with people, because I wasn't good at that at all. I was just completely kind of just nerding out about writing programs and coaching, and I wouldn't even talk to anybody else in the gym if I was coaching a client because I felt like they were paying for my time, and I always felt weird even like conversing even with another client of mine if I was coaching that client, and it's like I just didn't get it. You know what I mean? I didn't get it, and if I had taken the time to actually study what those people were doing well, I probably could have fast-tracked a lot of things in my fitness career. So I hope that answers your question, Thomas. We got another shout-out from Sam. Hello, Sam.
Hey, Sam.
Hope you're well.
All right, question number 2. I'm going to give it to you. Mm-hmm. So what were some of the things you guys did savagely well as a young intern or coach that made you stand out? From Lewis.
I would say, probably a number of things, but I think I have a pretty good sense of it. We both do from having worked with a lot of interns under us in the past. I guess I knew how to work, so a lot of people just don't know how to work. And that, it's like an instant turnoff, because if someone's looking for someone that they want to work under them or hire, they're looking for a worker, because that's the first rung on the pole that you're going to have to fill in for somebody else. You're going to have to be the worker so that they're looking for someone to hire because they have other stuff that they need to do, and they need you to do more of the stuff that you probably already know how to do, and just do it really well with a high attention to detail the same way they would. They just can't do it all themselves anymore. So I think, and you did this really well when you were an intern for sure, is just always staying busy. If I'm not coaching someone or doing a task that was assigned to me, I'm finding a task to do. It's getting self-started. So just moving places with a purpose and trying to find something to do were probably the things that are really going to make you stand out as a coach, because it makes the people that, I know when you're an intern or a young coach, you want people to teach you stuff. And nothing is going to turn them off to want to teach you stuff and go out of their busy day when you're not a good worker.
Yep. It's hilarious because I see a lot of resumes that will put on the resume, like, hard worker, highly motivated, blah, 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 all these cliche terms. It's like, well, no shit. Like, employees are expecting everyone who's applying to be a hard worker, even though they're not always that way. Yep. But, like, you shouldn't have to put it in writing. You should let your actions speak for that. But, when I was an intern, I feel like what helped me a lot was just to get good mentors without putting you guys on the spot and making you feel like you were doing extra work. Because there is kind of an aspect of getting it and understanding that, like, you're not going to go up to a certain person while you're an intern and be like, I want you to mentor me, because that puts it all on them. You as the intern, the person who wants to learn, the subordinate, needs to make it as easy as possible for the person who's going to mentor you, so that they have the ability to give you lots of information and teach you. And lucky for me, I had some great ones in you, Miguel, Tony Jonacor, Chris Howard. Everybody was really, really generous with their time, which I feel like was part of just not trying to make it feel like you guys weren't having to do all the work on the mentorship side. And a lot of that just came from training alongside you guys. Like, I remember sending you a Facebook message before I started the internship, because I had a meet coming up, like maybe a month after my internship started, and my training was going really, really badly. I remember saying, like, hey, I just want to hop in and train with you guys. And from day one, I would just lift with you and Tony Genocor, and whatever it is you guys were doing, I was doing it and learning by experience. So finding ways to obtain a mentor without making it feel like your mentor is doing all the work. Because nothing sucks like having somebody come up to you and be like, hey, I just want to pick your brain, or like, I want you to teach me this, and just like leaving it at that. Like, okay, well, now it's all on my plate. Like, what are you going to do to extract that information from me, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I mean, it makes perfect sense. Like, one way to look at it, which maybe isn't as is it's a little rougher, I guess, but is like by you as a young intern coming up and continually asking for, let's say, one of our time, which we do want to give to you, like it's part of the deal. What about the guy that's busting his ass cleaning up the gym while you're asking me all these questions? That's the person that deserves my time, and you're just eating it up right now. If you guys both just cleaned, you'd get done twice as fast. We'd have a little extra time left over, and we could all learn something. And I know that's maybe not as eloquently put, but just like from an action standpoint, that's kind of how I see it.
Well, you want to help that person more because they're putting in the effort to make the entire team better. And another thing that you reminded me of is something that I feel like helped me a lot was learning to ask good questions. Right. And a lot of that I think came from kind of like my journalism background and interviewing a lot of people and being able to ask questions that were simple but could extract the most information. So instead of asking like really shitty questions like, what's your training philosophy? Even though we asked that to a lot of our guests on here, but they're prepared for it. And we have a lot of time to kind of like discuss that. But making questions very like specific and picking the right time to ask them. I know I tried very hard to ask them at times where like you could give a good answer without feeling like you were being taken away from another task, something like that. So learning to ask good, specific questions and not asking these very like broad, lousy questions is another really good way to extract information from people who you view as a mentor.
Yeah. I think another caveat, like build on to that, is an internship is not like school. School, you show up and you are expecting the knowledge to just be stuck in your head by somebody who's being paid to teach you. An internship is much different, where I think it should be approached as, here's all the things I'm observing by doing. I have some initial questions, but I'm going to go home and research some of these on my own and get the obvious answers out of the way that I just didn't know, because you don't know what you don't know. And I'm going to come back with better questions that are more specific off of that.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the answers to a lot of the common questions that we hear can be answered by like stepping back and observing.
Yeah.
You know, like a lot of the questions I could ask you about your training philosophy, I could learn just by watching you coach and exercise, or like looking at a program that you've written, and the answers are like right there in front of me.
Yeah.
So being tactful about the way that you acquire that information.
Yeah, and just doing some self-questioning first. I mean, most of the time if someone asks me a question and we're in like a learning environment like an internship, my first response is going to be like, well, what do you think the answer to this question is? And then, though I know they possibly don't know, so they tell me what they think, and it's like, seems to make sense, right? Is there any reason that doesn't make sense? And you're like, no. Well, then I think you got it, kind of thing. So the more self-dialogue you can have like that and leave some of the bigger or more specific, kind of further down the road questions, those are the ones that you want to ask if you can. Yep. All right. So we have question 3, which I know you looked at first, and you're a little bit more well versed on, so I'll just build off.
I don't
of
know,
your
man.
answer.
We'll see.
We'll see. We're gonna try to answer it. Some questions are a little bit harder to answer than others. So, do we ever implement neural charge training from Bill?
So the simple answer is no, because before I received this question, I didn't know what it was. Mm-hmm. So did a little research on it, and to my understanding, Bill, neural charge training seems to be a like active recovery method where you take a couple of like I don't know if you want to call them explosive or like neurologically demanding exercises and like bang them out right in a row to try to like stimulate the nervous system to recover. I'll say that I've never used anything like that. I can see the benefit of it, but kind of like we were discussing earlier, I feel like if you're trying to recover, especially with a lot of the populations we're working with where we're doing like heavy barbell lifts, compound exercises that are very neurologically taxing, I want my recovery methods to probably be on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. Very light intensity, not neurologically demanding, things like low-intensity aerobic work, dragging a sled, mobility circuits, even just like foam rolling and soft tissue work. So I can say, honestly, I've never used neural charge training in my programming.
Yeah, and we might be completely fucking up what neural charge training
Maybe,
is.
and if we are, somebody let us know.
So I'll give you two answers. Here's how I will use maybe what could be called a neural charge, and that's going to be on the same day that we're doing lifting. I might do some explosive things up front to charge the nervous system. I mean, I think that's also kind of the proper place for them in the sequence of training anyways. But you could have some benefits where you prime up the nervous system so that you can utilize it more efficiently when you lift, so they say. I'm a bigger fan of following more of like a high-low philosophy when it comes to how we're going to stimulate the nervous system. So if we have different things in a program like weightlifting, sprinting, jumping, throwing, and they all are, more high intensity, more nervous system intense, I'm more likely to try to put those all on the same day so that it's a similar stimulus overall, and then have the second day, or sometimes you can drag that on for 2 days and then have this day. You want something low. So the question I get, because I think I've seen stuff like this thrown around before, and I feel like some of the people that throw it around contradict themselves sometimes, because they'll talk about the nervous system and how you can charge it up on these off days. But then if they talk like sympathetic and parasympathetic, they'll talk about how, being sympathetic is not a good state to be in. If you're trying to recover, you need to be parasympathetic. So maybe I'm missing something, but I don't understand how getting sympathetic is going to help me get parasympathetic. I'd rather just get a high dose of that in a consolidated time period and then get another high dose of being more relaxed in a time period. And that's always seemed to work out better.
Yeah, and one thing that I do know after doing a little bit of research about like neural charge training is that people will say like it makes them feel good. Kind of the idea that like sometimes you walk into the gym, you're sore, you're tired, you don't really feel like training, and you say to yourself, okay, let's just go like 15-minute rule. I can do anything for 15 minutes. And you do your warm-up and you start to train it, and suddenly you feel better and you're ready to go. But we know that just because something feels good doesn't mean it's good for you.
Right.
A very prominent fitness person who will go unnamed in a private interview with me talking about a subject like this said something very memorable to me. He said, cocaine and strippers feel good, but they're not good for you. And that's going to kind of be my opinion on this, where like even though it may make you feel good, it may not be the best option if you're trying to recover better.
Yeah, it doesn't have a lot of common sense to me to say, I'm not feeling 100% today, so I'm going to do this high intensity neural charge to feel better, when it's like, I mean, even if you are feeling better, you probably have, if you want to look at your nervous system like the glass of water type analogy, so you're just getting to like the top of the water that's only half full in the glass anyways, when you really should just be recovering so that the glass can completely fill itself back up, and then you can go hit it again. I mean, they're not really even that high neural things that you're doing from what I saw. Like, you're not even doing things full speed or at full intensity as far as weight on the bar. So
it seemed to utilize a lot of like jumping and like med ball throws and med ball slams and kind of these like fast twitchy, like quick explosive movements, not to fatigue, of course, which of course would wake up your nervous system. But we know that all recovery is aerobic, so like stimulating your aerobic system might be a better option, which is why I think we've been big proponents of like on your lifting days, lift hard, go heavy, whatever. And if you're going to do some sort of activity on your non-training days, make it really, really easy. Walking, biking, step ups, drag a sled, something that is so easy that you can keep your heart rate under control, that you're not accumulating any sort of lactate. Easy is the name of the game. And if you think you're going easy enough, probably go a little bit easier because people tend to overestimate or underestimate the intensity of whatever aerobic work they're doing.
Yeah. And in the larger picture, most of this doesn't matter for the majority of people anyways, because they're not training hard enough where they probably could go into the gym and throw a med ball and do a couple jumps and be totally fine. So it's kind of like, I'm a little ashamed that we talked about this for this long, to be honest, because it's just like a catchy tag phrase as well, like neural charge training. It sells ebooks, but it probably doesn't really hold that much weight in the scheme of things.
So to summarize, this sounds like it's something that might have a better place between the warm-up and the lifting as opposed to on an off day, correct?
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. All right. Question number 4, coming in from Michelle, one of our best beer buddies out there in the internet land. Michelle asks, what's the best core exercise for powerlifting?
Okay. And she'll be in the real realm soon. She's moving down here.
Yeah. Can't wait to treat you to all the best New England beers, Michelle.
Yes. Best core exercise, that's hard to say. But I would say the best ones are definitely anterior core. The ones that are going to have the most transfer to the lifts are going to be anterior core exercises. So anything that is either like a small amount of motion on the front side of the body or like anti-extension exercises like planks, even, like front squat holds. What else is there? Dead bugs. Anything like that is basically you're bracing all the muscles on the front side, stomach side of your body to keep yourself from arching your lower back, because that's very specific to the kind of bracing of the core that you're going to do during at least 2 of those 3 lifts. The bench press probably doesn't have a huge ton of like a true core aspect to it in that sense, since you're kind of stapled down to a bench. But so I think that's the best core exercise that transfers to powerlifting. I will add to that and say the most underutilized core exercise for powerlifters is stuff that's more rotational, more like in the transverse plane, I would say. And that's just because variability is really important to keeping you healthy and doing, we already talked about on the show before that injury is going to be mostly from like repetitive movements. And so if we can, I don't think enough powerlifters do core exercises, if you will, in planes outside of the sagittal plane. And I think it's important to litter those in. They don't need to be anything crazy, but just get them in there so that you're offering some variety and movement to your body.
Yep. Yeah, and I would agree with you. To add on top of that, pretty much anything that's anterior core anti-extension, because a lot of the big lifts, it's easy to go into a very extended pattern. So learning to like resist that position is super important. And then I think loaded carries are so valuable. You can use them nice and heavy. You can use them a little bit lighter to work on positioning. You can do loads in both hands, loaded on one hand. I love offset carries, so like a one-arm farmer's walk, or like a what the hell is it? Front rack, one-armed kettlebell carry, stuff like that. Because I think a lot of times lifters like understand what it means to like brace their midsection, but they have a hard time feeling their obliques. And obviously, you're under a couple 100 pounds on the squat, or you're getting ready to deadlift. You're not focusing on like feeling your obliques. But I feel like that's a muscle group that tends to get really left out. And they're very, very important in setting your pelvic position, setting your ribcage position. So learning to feel your obliques through some sort of like one arm or one-sided loaded carry, I think is really, really valuable. And when we moved a couple 1,000 pounds worth of equipment a couple weeks ago, last week, whenever it was, I blacked out because it was so hard. My abs and my obliques were so sore. And all of those were very like odd objects. Nothing was easy to carry. And it just shows you that I didn't even have to think about it. I was just trying to get that piece of equipment from point A to point B, and my abs got smoked.
Yeah, that's a great point. Carries, I would not have thought about. They're one that I like. I absolutely love in it, but I always forget to think about, I guess you could say. So we're about done. Beer number 1. I'm gonna time it since we're done 4 questions and we have 4 more to go.
And this was like showing a little bit of restraint because this is a very crushable, easy drinking beer.
Yep, and better than I remember. Like I left a little upset today with the offerings and like
I didn't buy any Eureka.
I didn't buy any. But
am
I wrong? Isn't this a little like hazier and a little thicker mouthfeel than usual?
Because I've still got Mosaic in my fridge and it's much more crisp.
Yeah.
Which is good, but this drinks more like a regular Treehouse. Off to the fridge I go.
All right. While Tony is in the fridge, I really have nothing to talk about. Hey, Tony's a lot better at that, at coming up with things to talk about while I run and get beer.
Good thing the fridge is close.
The fridge is close. And I am looking forward to this one.
Beer number 2. Another Rhode Island beer. 5th roadie beer in 3 shows.
5th? Oh, yeah. 5th?
Well, 3rd. Because I think 2, 2, and 1.
Oh, yeah, 5th. Yeah, you're right. Same brewery last time.
Right. All right, so we have Libby with Nelson, a blonde ale from Tilted Barn in Exeter, Rhode Island. Tilted Barn is the love of my life right now.
It's really good.
A really great small brewery in
really good.
southern Rhode Island. Literally a brewery out of a barn in a family's backyard. These people have been, they've had a Christmas tree farm for years. They just started brewing beers a couple of years ago, and it is absolutely delicious.
Yep. And this is actually named after one of their daughters.
Yep. So Libby is a blonde ale, a beer that has a rotating hop variation.
Just like Eureka.
Just like Eureka. So this one's with Nelson Sauvin.
Is Tilted? Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say that I read this in this Oxford Companion to Beer today, that Nelson is a hop that it was named Nelson Sauvin because it has characteristics of Sauvignon Blanc, the white wine. It is a white wine, right? I don't know shit about wine.
It's white.
If somebody knows whether it's white or red, let us know. But a lot of those wine-like characteristics. And another beer, a blonde ale that made me a believer in blonde ales.
Yep.
Look at the haze on that.
2 of my favorite hops going next to each other, Galaxy and Nelson, and they're both like displayed in these beers because they're so light.
God, that's fucking good. So my first trip to Tilted Barn. So they're open twice a week. They're open Friday and Saturday, each for 3 hours, and you're not allowed to line up for the beer more than an hour ahead of time. So the crowds are and the lines are nuts. So the first 2 times I went to Tilted Barn, they offered 2 beers per day, just like Treehouse. And they ran out of one of the 2 beers each of the first 2 times I was there. The first time I was there, it was Libby and Violet, which we had on. Have we had Violet on?
No,
we didn't.
No.
But Violet.
Don't tease me like that.
Fucking awesome. But I was so pissed that they ran out of Violet and IPA, and all I was left with was this damn blonde ale. But then I cracked one, had one, and was no longer disappointed because this is a phenomenal beer.
I like this beer. I love this beer. It's really good.
You basically have all of that like juiciness and hot flavor that you might get in an IPA or a double IPA with a low ABV, a little bit more drinkability.
I'm 100% a believer in both of these right now.
Yeah, they're tasting really, really good.
Like just like you read that a blonde ale can show mistakes, I think it also displays like the hop. Like, because we've had Galaxy-based IPAs and Nelson-based IPAs, but the Galaxy and the Nelson come through huge in these 2.
They really do. And I think like we read out of this book that because the malt characteristic is really kind of subdued, it's more like toasty instead of so much like caramel. The malt kind of stays on the backbone, and then anyone who watches this knows we're more hop guys than malt guys. So it lets the hop flavor just kind of shine and be in the forefront.
Yeah. This is one of my favorite beer nights we've had in a while.
How fucking smart do we sound, huh?
We sound great.
So smart.
Thanks to our new book.
Yeah.
Helping us out a little bit as well.
Your brother claims he's read this front to back, all 900 pages.
900 pages. This is the first step in us becoming cicerones. Is that
Cicerone.
Is that how you pronounce that?
I think so.
We'll have to see.
Based on your track record, it's probably not right.
Probably not. There's like extensive testing you have to do too to become a cicerone. Like is basically what, a beer expert?
Yeah, just like I don't know what a wine expert is called, but there's you gotta know your shit.
Life goal: become a Cicerone. Before I die. You should get free beer at any brewery if you walk in and you're a Cicerone.
So, career advice for you guys before you go get a master's degree, before you go get a CSCS.
Become a Cicerone.
Become a Cicerone.
You'll be all set. You'll meet plenty of good people. We lost all our listeners. All right, so this next question, it's your turn.
It's not. I asked the last one to you.
Yeah, so it's my turn to ask to you.
Right.
Yeah,
that's what I meant.
So, question number 5 from Jillian: why deload every 3 weeks?
Okay, so we typically deload every 4 weeks, right? So maybe
3 weeks of training. And then
3 weeks of training. So, right, make sure we're all on the same page. So, a kind of rule that we typically follow is 3 hard training weeks, 1 deload week. Recycle that over and over and over. And we've talked to some talked to some guests like Ryan Gleason, who deload very infrequently. We've talked to other coaches who deload just as frequently as we do. And my thought on this is that unless you're preparing for some sort of competition, it's never gonna hurt to deload more frequently, because you're not peaking for anything. It's never gonna hurt to back off a little bit so you can recover and then train hard again for another 3 weeks. So I think it's just the concept of literally 3 steps forward, 1 step back, and that 1 step back lets you go even further forward with each step on your next 3 hard weeks of training. Something that Alex Viata said that really resonated with me when he came and did a seminar here in Massachusetts was that if your lifters are saying to you during their deload week, like, man, I really needed this deload week, then you're probably 1 week too late.
Yeah.
It's always best to stay ahead of your fatigue than to let your fatigue accumulate too much to the point where like you must have a deload week and you're just like scraping by, crawling to try to get to that deload week so you feel like you're not going to die.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely just a case of like, better safe than sorry doesn't sound great, because it's like, well, there could be something better out there and you're just being better safe than sorry. But I think what it comes down to is like you said, it's all situational, so it all depends. We know the person that asked this question, so in this specific case, this person is someone that's training long term. We've never really been in a time crunch to get ready for a meet or anything like that. So there's, I guess, with all training, you're trying to progress into more and more of like a state of being overloaded so that you can then rest as much as needed to kind of super compensate. So you have to, in order to adapt from stress, you have to put a stress on the body that it hasn't felt before. And that can be done in the traditional sense that you think of it as like you just build up more and more and more and more. But it comes to a point of diminishing returns where instead of getting better, you'll just crash and fail completely because you'll just be so overloaded. The other way that you can actually get almost the same stimulus to react more powerfully again is to take a week of unloading, because by unloading it and then reintroducing to a stimulus that's pretty close to the same, it's still going to feel different to the body, and you'll make a little bit of progress from there. So it allows you, it's taking 3 steps forward and 1 step back, but really it's just, I feel like you're not really taking a step back in the truest sense. It's a week of overloading that you're not getting, but it's making it so that following week after you can maybe not get as much overload as you did the first time, but you still get a little bit of it. And that's like minimal effective dose. Like you're still getting enough to get better, and you're being better safe than sorry in the sense that like you're accounting for any fatigue that was there that you didn't realize. Well, yeah, basically that. I had something else, but I just lost it. Gone. Any fatigue that you didn't realize, and also just keeping the checks and balances as far as just staying healthy and staying rested
And that's
overall.
That's really important. So let's put this in perspective. So if you deload every 4th week, that's about once a month. That's about 12 deload weeks a year.
Yeah.
When you hurt your back in Tennessee,
yeah,
how long did it take you to recover?
I mean, it was going on and off, trying to train it, through it a little, around it a little, time off, but it really didn't feel good until maybe, like 10 weeks ago, 11 weeks ago.
So it's like about a year, right?
Almost a year.
So not to say that like your injury was because you didn't deload enough, but injuries can stick around a long fucking time.
Yeah.
Like 52 weeks of suboptimal squat training, that's a lot more than 12 weeks of deload training, right? So to put them side by side, so to stay ahead of fatigue, to stay ahead of potential injuries, like that's a trade-off that I'm willing to make.
Yeah. And I know with our clients, and pretty much I'm sure that everyone listening to this podcast, you have another fucking life too.
Yeah.
Like you're not a sponsored lifter who just lifts or doesn't really do anything else.
I'm glad you brought this up because I was thinking it. Like how much shit do you get done during deload week?
I have realized that and put value on that, because if we're talking about managing stress as a whole, which is a big job of almost your whole job really technically as a coach is to manage stress, then having a week where people, whether they're doing it, they're doing it or not, but I've talked to multiple people that have told me this, having that week that is coming, like I'm going to bust my ass for 3, I'm not going to have as many times for Aaron because I have to hit the gym after work or this and that. Having a week where your sessions are a little shorter, are a little bit more just refreshing, not really neural charge training, but a little bit more refreshing, those are going to be invaluable to you. So it's for sure. I'm not saying everyone I've ever programmed for, I do 3 weeks on and deload the 4th. I used to not do it as much, especially in my own training. I think we've touched upon that before. But I've always felt better. People feel better. It just kind of works. So the only time it doesn't work in my mind is there's levels of deloading. So some people I deload more than others as well. So that's a difference, and it doesn't work. Sometimes if you have like 10 weeks to prepare for a meet, you might want to hit, 5 weeks or so, or 4 weeks of all loading, and only maybe deload twice in that 10 weeks instead of, where you would try to fit in more.
Yep. And I'll say, like, at this point in my coaching career, when somebody's peaking for a powerlifting meet, I pretty much have like 3 methods that I go with. 2 of which are 6 weeks, and 1 that is 12 weeks, but that 12-week one still has a deload every 4th week. So even, the only time I don't like to deload people every 4th week is when there's a specific competition coming up where I typically like to stretch it to 6 weeks, but even then, 6 weeks versus 4, that's not that much of a difference.
I've deloaded people sooner and later sometimes. It really depends on the feedback I'm getting for them. So yeah, if we're not under a huge time crunch and you were a client, that I was programming for, if you're getting a deload every 4th week, that pretty much means our training is going on point, because that means we're hitting RPEs leading up to that every time that are appropriate, and they're not too much or too little that we need to drag on into another week of loading or unload a little bit sooner.
Yep. And something that I've been experimenting with a little bit is kind of what Ryan Gleason talked about a couple episodes back. And if you guys listen to that, awesome. If you haven't heard it, go back and listen to it. The idea of rotating through intensity of lifts almost in like a cube style, where you're basically only training 1 or 2 lifts heavy per week. And the other lift, let's say you're benching heavy this week, maybe you're squatting for volume and deadlifting for speed, or what Ryan called like technique, where if you're not training all 3 lifts heavy every week, you have to deload a little bit less frequently.
Yep.
So if you're a client of mine right now and you're going 6 weeks instead of 4 weeks for a deload, know that you're in the experimental group trying what Ryan has recommended. So thank you for being my guinea pigs.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right.
All right. Next question. Question number 6. So this question comes from Nick. I'm going to ask it to you, Greg. What do you think of using higher reps for beginners to groove neural muscular adaptations?
Yeah. I think that philosophy is archaic and bullshit, to be honest.
So we feel the same.
I won't sugarcoat it at all. Like, that's outdated textbook stuff, in my opinion. I think moving things quick for shorter reps, where you don't put yourself in a situation where things are going to slow down and that you're going to start compensating due to fatigue, and where you can step away and evaluate your technique, make an adjustment, and do that again. So 3 sets of 10 or 10 sets of 3.
I was going to say that.
I would rather go 10 sets of 3. And research has shown that if you use the same weight for both, you actually get more strength gains from doing 10 sets of 3 if you focus on moving the bar as fast as possible than you would from 3 sets of 10. Anyways, so that is a question that we got, and it's okay to make fun of the... No, not make fun. But I think it's just outdated, and if that's something that you're still doing, if you have a reason for it, go for it. But I think it's been proven to go the other way.
And it's well intentioned but poorly executed. So to get better at something, you have to do it a lot, right? So the idea of doing more, aka higher reps, is not like bad at its essence, but like you said, 3 sets of how many of the sets are going to look like sharper, cleaner, faster reps, like 3 sets of 10 or 10 sets of 3? Obviously each set is very fatiguing with 3 sets of 10, because rep 1 and rep 10 are not going to look the same. Yeah. Whereas 10 sets of 3, reps 1, 2, and 3 of pretty much every set are going to look exactly the same. So you're probably going to get between 25 and 30 really quality reps, whereas 3 sets of 10, maybe the first 5 reps of each set look great, and the reps 6 through 10 look like shit, so only 15 of 30 reps look good. I'd rather have 30 quality reps instead of 15. Because for a beginner, it's all about quality. That whole like grooving the neuromuscular pattern or whatever, it's about building skill. So if you were learning to play the guitar, you wouldn't automatically try to play like the hardest possible song. You'd learn something very simple and then progress from there. Or you'd play a very complicated song at a slower speed, learn it slowly, and then build up speed, not try to blow through it as sloppily as possible. So.
Right. Or if you're learning guitar, like you might, let's say like a little riff has like 10 notes that goes through it. You'll probably play, or let's say it has 30 notes. You're going to probably learn the first 10 and play them over and over again until you're really good at them, so that then you can learn the next 10 and just fluidly work into it. And that's kind of the same idea with lifting as well.
Yep. And like from a studying standpoint, some people call it chunking, taking like small bits of information and mastering it before you move on to the next one. I just think like high reps for beginners, not a good idea.
I agree with you. All right, so
2 more questions to go.
2 more. Do you think single leg exercises are as I gotta move this for a second. Are as efficient as bilateral exercises for building strength with athletes?
So, solid question. Single leg or unilateral exercises obviously play a huge role in preparing an athlete. A lot of athletic endeavors incur on one leg at a time. But if you're talking about efficiency and force production, obviously 2 legs are going to be better. A squat versus a Bulgarian split squat, a deadlift versus a 1-leg RDL. So I think you need to use both, but I'm still going to put more of my eggs in the bilateral basket, especially at first, just because force production is going to be so much more easier to produce there. And something that I remember Mike Reinold talking about a long time ago was that like single leg exercises can't be extrapolated to like, okay, whatever you do for your 3 rep max on a Bulgarian, you can't take that and double it and say that's what I'm going to do for a 3 rep max on a back squat. because you're not really just using one leg on a Bulgarian. You have your back leg as some support and balance. Inevitably, you're going to apply some pressure into your foot support. So it's not as black and white as that. You're going to use both, but still, I'm going to put more stock in the bilateral exercise, because if you're trying to produce force, 2 legs are always going to be better than one. I just think the injury risk is actually a little bit lower because you're not fucking around on one leg trying to balance with a heavy load.
Yep, absolutely. And also, like, this whole notion, and you alluded to it too, that like, okay, so I can do a 200-pound squat. Let's say I'm a 200-pound person. I can do a 200-pound squat, or I could do Bulgarian split squats or a single leg exercise for 110 on each leg. And so that's better than doing the 200-pound squat. Well, I guarantee you that the 110 that you can do on each leg is not going to move very fast, because it's a lot to do on one leg. And that a 200-pound squat done with both legs is going to move way faster. So when you think about you having to move yourself and create forces into the ground more than double your body weight, you're probably going to want to get your body accustomed to moving that type of force production quickly. Do I think single leg exercises are hugely important, especially for athletes? Yeah, they need to be part of it. Well, do I rarely use them though as an upfront, big ticket exercise, unless there's a reason that we can't perform a bilateral exercise due to some kind of like orthopedic limitation.
Yep, that's a good point. You do see a lot of athletes with hip or lower back issues where maybe they just feel better on single leg exercises, but even if that's like their A1, so to speak, I'm probably not loading it past like a set of 5. Yeah. You can certainly dip into the like sets of 3 or something heavy like that, but that's something that's, I would say, is the outlier as opposed to the norm.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, last question, last call. I can't see the screen.
Sorry.
All right, this is a good one. All right, Rob asks, what are your thoughts on the recent uptick in fitness infographics on Instagram?
Fitness infographics.
Instagraphics.
We'll call them Instagraphics. Instagraphics.
I know you got strong opinions about this.
Yeah, I have strong opinions about them, and there's some people I respect that are using them. So let me list some of the positives first.
Okay.
They get hopefully a good message out to a wide variety of people because they're easy to digest and use. That's the positives of them. I guess that's their point, right? The problem is, just like anything in the fitness world, it's just a huge pendulum swing type thing. Oh, people like the infographics, they're drawn to them. We could say yes. We could also look at just the general population in the world and say, well, it's no joke that people want infographics that give you a very small percentage of this story easily digestible, because people don't read books anymore. People don't read blog posts, articles anymore. Then they don't read blog posts anymore. Now they don't even read Instagram posts anymore that have some text. So we're going to bring this down to the point of where we're just going to make pictures that tell you to do something. And by that point, a picture may say 1,000 words, but an infographic doesn't. And there's a lot of things missing from those messages too. So it's a trend that a year from now will not exist, in my opinion. And so I am not necessarily someone that sees myself ever diving into anything that's just going to come and go like that. And so while they provide the positives as well, I guess my message to people would just be like, don't just hop on a bandwagon just because it's going to get you a lot of followers, because the kind of followers that it's going to get you aren't going to be people that mean anything anyways. Like they're not going to be people walking through your door, most likely to your gym. They're not going to be online clients that stick around for a long time. an infographic to me appeals to someone who's more quick fix oriented, or who flakes out a lot, or just wants the easiest thing, basically.
And I'll play devil's advocate here. I'll look at like what I know you listed some positives. I do see a lot of positives in it. I think you can reach an extraordinary amount of people. It seems to be something that generates a lot of interest on Instagram, so you could potentially reach a ton of people, which means you could theoretically help more people if people really take it to heart. Also, I think of it as a good way to kind of like tease some of the information that you have, so the people who are super interested are probably going to reach out to you. So whether it's from direct message, or they email you, or they just inquire about something more, the people who like it kind of like sparks an interest, those people are going to follow up on it. So I do think it's a way to potentially reach more people at a deeper level and generate more business. But at the same time, it feels like a quality versus quantity thing. Like you're probably going to get more quantity, less quality. There's only so much good information you can pack into that little graphic on your screen. And like you said, attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. Should we feed into that? Should we accept that? Or should we try to push it back towards people appreciating longer form, more dense, higher quality information? I don't know. It's tough to get people to read 2,000 word blog posts these days. Is this the way of the future? I'm probably on your side that this might be a fad that goes away. I applaud the people who are using it for good. I wag my finger at the people who are jumping on the bandwagon and not using it for good.
Yeah. And there's definitely levels of people doing it really well and not so well. And that's readily apparent. But unfortunately for the people I think that are doing it really well, they're going to be kind of lost in the shuffle at the moment.
And you know what I think is perhaps the worst part of all of this is it just is a breeding ground for plagiarism. There are people who are blatantly stealing other people's infographics, slapping their own, Instagram name on it, and just passing it off as their own. It's the fucking Wild Wild West out there, man. So like that part of it sucks. It really, really sucks. So if you want to use infographics to increase your viewership, to drum up business, to help more people, awesome. If you're just using it to see the number of likes you get to go up, then shame on you, because that's not what this is about. The person who dies with the most likes and the most or the most Instagram followers does not win. That's not how this works.
This is true. That is something that I just don't think anyone should strive to have on their headstone. Is he was a good man or woman, and he had the most career Instagram likes ever. There is a person that will probably die lonely.
Yep. It's always a battle, quality versus quantity. This seems to be more in the quantity column instead of quality.
Yes. All right, well, that is 8 questions. We finished 2 beers. We've put in over an hour of time. I think we have done this episode justice.
Yep. So thank you guys all for the questions that you asked, for giving us enough content to fill a Solo Dome episode.
Solo Dome. # Solo Dome.
If you don't know what Solo Dome is,
look it up.
Look it up. Then you'll know. We'll tell you when you're older. Next week, I know we teased it last week, scheduling snafu, but next week, as of now, we're scheduled to sit down and talk to the one and only,
the man, the myth, the legend,
Tony Gentilcore, at Core Performance in Brookline, Massachusetts. The first ever offsite episode?
Yep. I bet it's the first beer that's ever drank in Core, too.
Probably. We'll have some good stories. And Tony's an awesome dude. Great coach. Funny as all hell. Great taste in hip-hop music. It's going to be a great episode.
Yep. So stay tuned, and we will see you guys next week.